A Werewolf Shifter romance audiobook. Written by Jane. Prologue. The air in the cavern was thick, heavy with the scent of damp stone and a power so old it hummed in your teeth. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of moonlight that pierced the ceiling, illuminating carvings on the walls, symbols of unity, of wolves standing shoulder to shoulder, their howls echoing across time. This was where it began. This was where the first Lycan King, his heart burdened by a vision of coming darkness, knelt before the Earth Mother's altar. He wasn't alone. An Omega, pure of spirit, stood beside him, her hands glowing with a gentle, verdant light. Together, they forged the sacred pact, a bond meant to ensure survival, to keep the blight, a creeping shadow, at bay. For generations, the pact held. It was a delicate balance, a whisper of peace across warring lands. Each union, each fated pair, renewed the ancient magic, strengthening the shield against the encroaching decay. But then, pride began to fester. Fear coiled in the hearts of men, even those with the blood of wolves. They forgot the old ways. They dismissed the whispers of lore as mere superstition. They believed their own strength was enough. What followed was a slow, agonizing decay. The land began to weep. The rivers grew sluggish, the forests sickened, and a cold despair settled over the pacts, unnoticed by those too blinded by their own arrogance. The blight, patient and hungry, stirred in its ancient slumber. It waited. It watched. Because of that, the sacred bond, once a lifeline, became a forgotten echo. Deep down, the earth knew the truth. It knew that only a return to the ancient ways, a true union of fated souls, could mend the fractured world. It knew that sometimes destiny must be reclaimed, even if it appears as an act of cruelty. And it knew that a quiet Omega, a forsaken one, held the key to a power far greater than any king's pride. Her world tilted, and just like that, everything changed. The earth beneath Lyra's kneeling form felt like powdered bone, dry and brittle despite the morning's mist. She ran her fingers through it, the fine dust clinging to her skin, a stark contrast to the vibrant soil she remembered from her childhood. This patch of healing herbs, usually robust and fragrant, now drooped, their leaves a sickly, pale green, edged with a mournful yellow. They looked like forgotten dreams, slowly fading away. Lyra pressed her palm flat against the ground, willing warmth, willing life, but the earth offered nothing back, only a chilling indifference. Why isn't anyone else seeing this? She wondered, a familiar ache settling in her chest. She was Lyra, the Omega daughter of Alpha Thorn, a gentle presence in a pack that valued strength and booming voices. Her purpose, she was often reminded, was to be agreeable, to maintain harmony, to blend seamlessly into the background. And so, she often did. Still, a quiet rebellion stirred within her whenever she saw the subtle signs of decay spreading through their once lush territory. Because of that, she spent hours in the communal garden, trying to coax life from the wilting plants. She didn't know what scared her more, the dying land or the thought that she might be the only one who cared enough to notice. Pack members, boisterous and confident, strode past, their laughter echoing through the morning air. "Morning, Lyra!" one called, a fleeting glance her way before their attention snapped back to their own important conversations. It was always like that. A polite acknowledgement, then a swift dismissal. Lyra offered a small, shy smile in return, her gaze drifting towards the grand central lodge. From there, her father, Alpha Thorn, held court. His voice, a deep rumble of authority, carried on the breeze, punctuated by hearty laughter. He was a mountain of a man, his presence demanding respect, his pride a tangible aura around him. He spoke of hunting routes, of border patrols, of the pack's strength. Lyra watched him, a knot tightening in her stomach. He was everything she wasn't: powerful, decisive, undeniably important. She was just Lyra, the Omega who tried to save dying herbs. Maybe it was fate that she felt this connection to the wilting earth, a connection no one else seemed to possess. Soon after, a hush fell over the garden, a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. All laughter ceased. Lyra looked up, startled. A lone figure, cloaked in dark, heavy fabric, rode slowly towards the lodge on a massive black steed. His presence was quiet, yet it commanded attention, a stillness that felt both ancient and ominous. This was no ordinary visitor. This was a messenger, and the air around him crackled with a silent, profound significance. His arrival was a ripple in the calm, a prelude to a storm Lyra couldn't yet comprehend. The messenger dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of immense power barely contained. He was tall, even for a Lycan, his features sharp and unyielding beneath the hood of his cloak. He carried no weapon, no banner, only a simple rolled parchment. Alpha Thorn, his usual boisterous confidence momentarily subdued, descended the steps to meet him. The entire pack gathered in a tense, silent semicircle, Lyra among them, her heart thrumming like a trapped bird. Without another word, the messenger unrolled the parchment. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, carrying to every corner of the clearing, cutting through the thick silence. By ancient decree, by sacred pact, the Lycan King, Alaric of the mist-bound peaks, offers his hand for the union with Lyra, Omega daughter of Alpha Thorn, a bond foretold to bring an era of unparalleled peace. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Me? The word echoed in her mind, a frantic, disbelieving whisper. Every eye in the pack turned to her, their gazes a heavy, suffocating weight. Her cheeks burned, hot with mortification. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a specimen under a microscope. This wasn't an honor. It was a public dissection. The Lycan King, the ruler of an old, terrifyingly powerful lineage, known for his formidable reputation and the ancient mysteries of his lands. And he wanted her? She felt like a lamb offered for sacrifice, not a bride. Her stomach churned, and she longed for the earth to swallow her whole. On the other hand, Alpha Thorn bristled. His face, initially stunned, hardened into a mask of indignation. He saw it not as a prophecy, but as a challenge, an attempt to diminish his authority. His chest puffed out, his jaw set. "The Thorn Pack bows to no one," he declared, his voice booming, regaining its usual force. "My daughter is mine to bestow, not to be claimed by ancient, forgotten lore. We reject this offer." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Lyra flinched, shrinking further into herself. His words were a public scorn, a slap in the face of a powerful ruler. She felt a wave of nausea, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was her father's pride, his fear, playing out for all to see, and she was caught in the middle. She was nothing but a pawn in his defiant game. The messenger remained impassive, his golden eyes, piercing even from a distance, fixed on Lyra for a fleeting moment before he turned back to Alpha Thorn. In that moment, the air itself seemed to chill. The vibrant sounds of the forest faded, replaced by an unnatural, profound silence. The very light seemed to dim, casting long, ominous shadows. It wasn't a physical storm, but a quiet, crushing pressure that descended upon them all. A palpable sense of doom. The silence was absolute, heavier than any sound Lyra had ever known. The messenger, who had been standing before Alpha Thorn, simply shifted. Not in form, but in presence. His cloak seemed to deepen in shadow, his posture growing impossibly tall, his stillness radiating an ancient, sorrowful power. This was no mere messenger. This was the Lycan King himself, Alaric. His golden eyes, now devoid of any pretense, locked onto Lyra. There was no menace in them, only a profound regret, a deep-seated pain that mirrored the ache in her own chest. It was the look of someone forced to do something agonizingly necessary. Lyra felt an inexplicable pull, a strange resonance deep within her, battling with the terror that threatened to consume her. Every instinct screamed to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot, drawn by the sorrow in his gaze. She didn't know what scared her more, the powerful king or the strange connection that pulsed between them. He turned his attention back to Alpha Thorn. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer merely resonant, but carried the weight of ages, a quiet thunder. "You have broken a sacred covenant, Alpha Thorn, not of war but of destiny denied. What was foretold I must now reclaim." He took a slow, deliberate step towards Lyra. The pack remained frozen, stunned by the revelation of his identity and the quiet storm he embodied. Lyra's breath hitched. She saw her father's face, a mask of dawning horror and regret, as the full weight of his public rejection crashed down on him. He had scorned a king, and now the king was here, not for battle, but for her. Alaric reached her, his hand extended, not in a grab, but an invitation. His fingers, long and strong, brushed hers. A jolt, like static electricity, passed between them, startling her. It wasn't painful, but a strange, undeniable current that seemed to hum through her very bones. He didn't snatch her, he simply claimed her, his touch firm, guiding her forward. Lyra stumbled, her legs suddenly weak. She looked back at her father, who stood rigid, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a crushing guilt. The silence was broken only by the rustle of Alaric's cloak as he turned, leading Lyra away from the stunned pack, away from her familiar world, towards the mist-shrouded path that led to his ancient territory. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against the quiet resolve of the Lycan King. Her life, as she knew it, was over. What followed was a journey into the unknown, a path that would either break her or forge her into something entirely new. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something ancient, like old stone and forgotten magic. Lyra rode on a sturdy, quiet horse, flanked by two of Alaric's silent escorts. Alaric himself rode ahead, a dark silhouette against the swirling mist, his back a wall of unreadable resolve. He hadn't spoken a single word to her since he'd taken her. Not a threat, not a comfort, just silence. Lyra expected cruelty, rough handling, but instead she found only a strange, detached courtesy. The escorts offered her water, even a dried fruit, their faces impassive. It was unsettling, this lack of malice. "Why isn't he hurting me?" she wondered, a new, unsettling question joining the frantic ones in her mind. As they journeyed deeper, the landscape began to shift, as if the world itself was transforming. The familiar, sun-dappled forests of her home pack gave way to gnarled, ancient trees, their branches twisted like arthritic fingers reaching for a sky perpetually veiled in mist. Ethereal, glowing flora pulsed faintly in the gloom, casting soft, otherworldly light on the path. The ground beneath them felt softer, spongier, almost alive. Lyra could feel a faint hum in the air, a subtle vibration that resonated deep within her bones. It was a strange, beautiful, terrifying place. She clutched the reins, her knuckles white, her gaze darting, searching for an escape route that never appeared. Every turn of the path seemed to lead them further into this mystical unknown, further from everything she knew. Because of that, a growing sense of isolation settled over her, heavier than the mist itself. She was a leaf torn from its branch, adrift in a strange current. Her immediate goal was simple: survival. She needed to understand her situation, to find a way to escape, even though every fiber of her being screamed that she was utterly helpless. What kind of monster takes someone like this, she asked herself, yet the king's silent, sorrowful gaze from the clearing still haunted her. It didn't fit the picture of a monstrous captor. Maybe it was fate, but Lyra felt a strange pull towards the ancient energy of this land, a connection she couldn't explain. Eventually, the mist thickened, swirling around them like a living thing. Through the swirling gray, a colossal structure began to emerge. It was a massive, ancient fortress, seemingly carved from the very mountainside, its dark stone walls rising impossibly high, shrouded in perpetual mist. Its grandeur was breathtaking, its scale terrifying. This was her new prison, a place of silent, imposing power. The fortress gates, massive slabs of ancient wood and iron, groaned open, revealing a cavernous courtyard. The air inside was cool, damp, and smelled of old stone and something faintly metallic, like forgotten blood. Lyra was led through echoing halls, her footsteps unnervingly loud in the profound silence. She expected a dungeon, cold and damp, but instead, she was ushered into lavish chambers. The room was vast, adorned with intricate tapestries depicting ancient Lycan battles and mystical creatures. A plush fur rug covered the stone floor, and a roaring fireplace offered a deceptive warmth. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating. Her immediate goal was to find an escape. She moved like a shadow, testing the heavy wooden door, finding it locked from the outside. She peered out the tall, arched windows, only to see sheer rock faces dropping into the swirling mist below. No matter how hard she tried, there was no way out. A wave of frustration, hot and bitter, washed over her. She tried to speak to the few silent servants who brought her food and fresh clothes. "Where am I? What does he want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. But they only bowed their heads, their faces impassive, their silence a wall she couldn't breach. What's worse, Alaric himself appeared briefly, a silent specter. He stood in the arched doorway, his golden eyes sweeping over her, unreadable, before disappearing again. He offered no explanation, no reassurance, just that watchful, unsettling presence. Lyra felt trapped, utterly alone, and a gnawing uncertainty about his intentions began to fester. Was this a game? Was he waiting for her to break? Her emotional state swung between desperate hope and crushing despair. She paced the room, her thoughts spinning like a frantic whirlwind. She was a bird caught in a net, and the net was made of silk and gold. Days bled into weeks. Still, Lyra remained a captive in luxury. She ate the fine food, wore the soft clothes, and explored every inch of her lavish prison. She noticed the profound loneliness that pervaded the vast, echoing halls of the fortress. It was a silence that spoke of centuries, of solitude, a loneliness that strangely mirrored her own. It was a loneliness that hinted at a deeper story, a secret burden carried by the king himself. Boredom, a dull, aching companion, became Lyra's reluctant motivator. She couldn't escape, but she could explore the permitted areas. Her immediate goal shifted from pure escape to understanding. She needed answers. She needed to know why. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a vast, ancient library. The air here was thick with the scent of aged parchment and dust, a comforting aroma that somehow eased the tension in her shoulders. Shelves upon shelves of scrolls and leather-bound tomes stretched to the vaulted ceiling, a silent testament to forgotten knowledge. In fact, she found Alaric there. He wasn't looking menacing, or even at her. He sat hunched over a massive, illuminated manuscript, his brow furrowed, a pained, weary expression etched on his face. He looked less like a fearsome king, and more like a man burdened by an impossible weight. He didn't acknowledge her presence directly. Lyra hesitantly approached a nearby table, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on an ancient scroll. It depicted strange symbols and images of Lycans, not as warriors, but as guardians of the earth. She picked it up, her curiosity overriding her fear. As if pulled by a string, Alaric subtly gestured towards the scroll in her hand, then towards a comfortable reading nook by a tall window. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at her directly. But the gesture was clear. Read. Then, without another word, he rose and left, disappearing into the shadows of the towering shelves. His unexpected allowance was a turning point. Lyra's new immediate goal was to devour every word, to piece together the fragmented history that had led her here. Her emotional state shifted from desperate frustration to a cautious, almost eager, determination. Deep down, she knew the truth. This was her commitment. She was no longer just resisting. She was seeking to understand. The lore within these walls was the key to her gilded cage. She began to read, her eyes devouring the ancient script. She learned of sacred pacts, of ancient bloodlines, of a rare, gentle magic tied to the earth and the heart's deepest sorrows, the gift of the forsaken Omegas, Was it fate that she was drawn to these particular texts? As Lyra read, a faint, almost imperceptible hum began beneath her skin, a resonance with the ancient words, a subtle vibration that hinted at a dormant power waiting to awaken. This hum was a subhook, a quiet promise of what was to come, a mystery yet to unravel. The scent of old parchment and dry ink filled Lyra's lungs, a comforting weight that settled her racing thoughts. Days bled into weeks, each one spent hunched over ancient texts, her fingers tracing faded script, her mind devouring every word. She learned of Lycan history, not the warrior tales her father favored, but stories of ancient pacts, of balance, and of a rare, almost forgotten magic. She discovered the gift of the forsaken Omegas, a gentle power, tied to the earth and the deepest sorrows of the heart. It was a magic often dismissed, misunderstood, or simply lost to time. Could this be what I felt in the garden? She wondered, a tiny spark of hope igniting in her chest. She was so engrossed she barely noticed Alaric's presence at first. He would appear like a shadow, silent as the mist that clung to his mountain home. He never spoke, yet he subtly guided her. One day, a scroll about ancient healing rituals would be left open on a table she hadn't noticed before. Another time, a specific tome on elemental magic would be nudged to the front of a shelf. Lyra felt his silent gaze, a heavy warmth on her back, but when she turned, he would be gone, leaving only the lingering scent of pine and something wild, like rain on stone. She was intensely curious about his motives, because his actions contradicted the image of a cruel captor. Still, a lingering fear kept her from speaking first, her voice a fragile thing in the vast silence. One afternoon, while reading about the symbiotic relationship between Lycans and the earth, a sudden, sharp ache pulsed in her fingertips. She looked down at a small, withered potted plant on the table beside her. Its leaves were brown, brittle. Without thinking, Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing the dry soil. A faint golden light pulsed from her palm, warm and soft, like a captured sunrise. Just like that, the plant shuddered, its brown leaves unfurling, turning a vibrant, impossible green. A tiny, perfect bloom, the color of moonlight, unfurled. Lyra gasped, pulling her hand back as if burned. Her heart hammered, not from fear, but from a dizzying mix of shock and awe. This was it. This was the hum she'd felt. This was the gift. As the silence stretched, Lyra stared at the impossibly vibrant flower, a tiny beacon of life in her gilded cage. This accidental bloom was a subhook, a tantalizing glimpse of the power within her, a power she needed to understand. The next morning, Lyra returned to the library, her heart thrumming with a new kind of urgency. Her immediate goal was clear: replicate the bloom. She found another withered plant, its life force barely clinging to its brittle stem. She focused, willing the golden light, willing the warmth. She pressed her hands to the pot, concentrating until her temples throbbed. Nothing. Only a faint warmth, a flicker that died before it could truly ignite. Frustration boiled over, hot and bitter. She tried again, and again, her attempts futile. Why was it so easy before? She wondered, her lower lip trembling. She felt a familiar wave of inadequacy, her old misbelief that she was powerless creeping back in. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the table. Alaric. He stood over her, his golden eyes, usually so distant, now fixed on her hands, on the wilting plant. Lyra's breath caught. She braced herself for a reprimand, for anger, but it never came. Instead, he knelt beside her, his movements fluid and quiet. He reached out, his large hand gently covering hers on the pot. His skin was warm, calloused, and a jolt, like a lightning strike, shot through her arm. "You push too hard," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. "The earth does not demand. It responds. You must listen." He guided her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Feel its pulse. Match your own to it. Ground yourself." He demonstrated a simple grounding technique, his breathing deep and even, his energy flowing into the earth. Lyra followed his lead, focusing on the connection, not the outcome. The hum beneath her skin returned, stronger this time, a vibrant song. Because of that, a soft, golden light bloomed from their joined hands, enveloping the plant. Slowly, miraculously, the withered leaves unfurled, regaining their color. Then a new bud, plump and perfect, swelled and burst into bloom, even more vibrant than the last. Lyra stared, awestruck. Her emotional state was a dizzying mix of wonder, relief, and a burgeoning, cautious hope. This was their first direct interaction about her power, and it had been tender. Alaric, the fearsome Lycan King, was her teacher, patiently guiding her. This interaction subtly deepened their bond, shifting it from captor-captive to something fragile yet profoundly connected. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. How did you know?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He simply met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps ancient sorrow, perhaps pride in his golden eyes. The next day, Alaric led Lyra through a hidden passage deeper into the mist-bound peaks. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying a faint, sickly sweet scent that made Lyra's stomach clench. Her instincts surged, screaming wrong. They emerged into a secluded ancient grove, but it was nothing like the vibrant forests she knew. This was a place of profound decay. Trees stood like skeletal sentinels, their bark peeling, their branches brittle and bare. The ground was cracked, dry, and a dark, oozing substance seeped from the roots of some trees. Lyra felt it, clear as day. The land was screaming. Alaric stopped, his posture rigid, his gaze sweeping over the devastation. "This is the blight," he said, his voice stripped of its usual quiet strength, raw with pain. "It spreads, slowly, insidiously. It consumes all life." He unrolled a series of maps, ancient and brittle, spread them on a flat stone. Lines, dark and spreading like a disease, snaked across the parchment. Lyra's breath hitched. One of the lines, a particularly thick, angry vein, stretched perilously close to the familiar borders of her former pact's territory. Her heart skipped. "Your father's rejection of the pact. It didn't just break a promise," Alaric continued, his voice low. "It severed a vital magical conduit. It accelerated the blight's spread. It is why I claimed you. The union of our lines, Lyra, and your unique power, the gift of the forsaken Omegas, are the only hope." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a desperate plea. "This isn't about power or territory. It's about survival. For all pacts." Lyra stared at the maps, then at the dying grove, then at Alaric. The truth unraveled, cold and sharp. He wasn't her captor. He was a guardian, burdened by a prophecy her father had ignored. Her emotional state was a whirlwind of profound shock, fear for her former pack, and a dawning sense of immense, terrifying responsibility. Her old misbelief that she was insignificant shattered like glass. She was central to this. More importantly, she saw the tenderness the formidable king reserved for his ailing land, the pained look in his eyes when he watched her. He wasn't a monster. He was a desperate man, carrying the weight of a dying world. She felt it. The land's suffering, a deep, resonant ache that mirrored Alaric's own. With every heartbeat, Lyra felt her resolve solidify. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched a blighted tree. A faint, healing glow emanated from her palm, a small victory against the encroaching darkness. It was a promise. This blight, this silent killer, was a new kind of antagonist, far more terrifying than any Lycan warrior. And Lyra, the Omega who once felt powerless, now knew her true purpose: to fight it. The air in the blighted grove was thick with the scent of decay, a cloying sweetness that made Lyra's stomach churn. She stood amidst the skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the perpetually gray sky. Her immediate goal was to heal this place, to push back the creeping death. She focused, channeling the gift of the forsaken Omegas, pouring every ounce of her newfound power into the cracked earth. A soft, golden light pulsed from her hands, spreading in fragile tendrils. But the blight, it was like a hungry beast, absorbing her efforts, barely flinching. Lyra pushed harder until her muscles trembled and her head swam. The effort drained her, leaving her weak and gasping, the golden light flickering out. She collapsed to her knees, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. It's too big, she thought, a cold dread seeping into her bones. I'm not strong enough. Alaric was there in an instant, his large hand gentle on her back, a grounding presence amidst her despair. His golden eyes, usually so guarded, held a deep, shared pain. The blight accelerates, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Faster than the lore predicted. It feeds on despair, Lyra, on broken bonds. He led her to a smooth, obsidian scrying pool hidden beneath a gnarled ancient tree. The surface, usually still, swirled with murky images. Look, he commanded, his voice soft. The pool shimmered, and Lyra gasped. She saw her homeland, the familiar forests now skeletal, the river a sluggish, dark ribbon. She saw her pack, their faces hollow, their movements slow like ghosts. And then she saw her father, Alpha Thorn. He stood alone on the lodge porch, his once proud shoulders slumped, his face etched with a profound, consuming guilt. He looked older, broken. A sharp pang of concern, raw and unexpected, pierced Lyra's heart. Despite his pride, despite his rejection, he was still her father. His despair, she realized, was feeding the blight, making it stronger. Because of that, Lyra felt a renewed urgency, a desperate need to master her power, not just for the world, but for him. Her emotional state was a whirlwind of urgency, frustration at her limitations, and a renewed pang of concern for her father. The pressure was building, a suffocating weight on her shoulders. Alaric, seeing her distress, led her away from the scrying pool, his hand still warm on her arm. There is more to the prophecy, he said, his voice grave. A deeper sacrifice. A final key. He led her to a hidden chamber, carved deep within the mountain, its entrance veiled by shimmering mist. This revelation was a subhook, a promise of deeper mysteries yet to unravel, a new layer to their shared burden. The air in the hidden chamber was cool and still, thick with the scent of ancient dust and untold secrets. Alaric moved to a pedestal in the center, where a single, glowing crystal pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. He turned to Lyra, his golden eyes holding a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, a raw honesty that made her heart ache. The sacred pact, he began, his voice a low, resonant rumble, was never just a political alliance. It was a magical conduit. The union of our two lines, Lyra, it activates the gift of the forsaken Omegas to its fullest potential. It allows you to channel enough power to combat the blight. He paused, his gaze unwavering. Your father's rejection. It didn't just break a promise. It shattered that conduit. It was like severing a vital artery, and the blight, it surged through the wound. Lyra swayed, her mind reeling. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. Her father's pride had not just doomed his pack, it had unleashed this cataclysm upon all. You claimed me, she whispered, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Alaric's jaw tightened, his eyes clouding with an ancient pain. I had no choice, the prophecy was clear, you were the key. I knew it would appear as an act of cruelty, a kidnapping. But it was the only way to preserve the possibility of our union, to save our world. I have carried that burden, Lyra, the knowledge that I had to be your captor, to be your guardian. His voice was rough with emotion, a rare crack in his formidable facade. Every day, I watched you, knowing the truth, knowing the pain I caused. It was torment. He looked away, his shoulders slumping, revealing the immense weight he carried. Lyra's emotional state was a dizzying mix of profound shock, a dawning understanding of Alaric's immense sacrifice, and a complex surge of anger at her father's blindness, intertwined with a burgeoning, unexpected tenderness for the man before her. He hadn't been a monster. He had been a desperate king, sacrificing his own reputation, his own peace, for a greater good. Her misbelief that she was a mere pawn, insignificant in the grand scheme, shattered like the crystal in the prophecy. She was central. She was the other half of this sacred bond. The air thickened between them, charged with unspoken emotions. In the quiet that followed, Lyra reached out, her hand trembling, and gently touched his arm. He flinched, then slowly, tentatively, turned his hand to meet hers. Their fingers intertwined, a silent acknowledgement of their shared destiny and the powerful, undeniable connection that bloomed between them. This was the midpoint shift, the moment everything changed, the stakes becoming deeply personal. The touch lingered, a warm current flowing between them, a silent promise. But the urgency of their situation pulsed beneath the surface. Lyra, now understanding the full depth of her father's mistake, felt a renewed, fierce determination. Her immediate goal was to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with him and to fully master her power for the coming battle against the blight. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she shared with the earth, now amplified by Alaric's presence. She attempted a magical message, a desperate plea carried on the wind, hoping to pierce her father's denial. She envisioned her words, sharp and clear, about the blight, about the pact, about the truth. It was difficult, draining, like pushing against a solid wall. She received no clear response, only a vague, chilling sense of his continued torment, his stubborn denial, a heavy shadow clinging to his spirit. He still doesn't see, she thought, a wave of sadness washing over her. His pride was a fortress, even stronger than Alaric's. Meanwhile, the blight, sensing the discord, sensing the approaching union, visibly encroached further into Alaric's territory. The mist outside the chamber seemed to darken, the air growing colder, carrying the sickly sweet scent of decay closer. It was a physical manifestation of the exhilarating danger, a relentless enemy that didn't wait for permission. Alaric, seeing her struggle and the blight's relentless advance, knew time was running out. "We must push harder," he stated, his voice firm, pulling her from her thoughts. "The bond must be absolute." He began to intensify her training, pushing her beyond her perceived limits. They spent hours in the blighted groves, Lyra channeling her power, Alaric guiding and amplifying, their energies intertwining. He taught her to draw strength from the earth's sorrow, to transmute the blight's decay into a healing force. She learned to feel the subtle shifts in the land, to anticipate the blight's movements. With every lesson, with every shared effort, their connection deepened, becoming less about destiny and more about an undeniable, burgeoning love. This intense training was a subhook, hinting at the powerful transformation Lyra was undergoing, preparing her for the ultimate confrontation. The air in the training chamber hummed with raw energy, a living thing that crackled around Lyra and Alaric. Her immediate goal was to fully synchronize her power with his, because the fate of their world depended on it. They stood facing each other, palms outstretched, not quite touching, but close enough for the heat of their combined auras to mingle. "Feel my pulse," Alaric murmured, his voice a low, steady thrum that resonated deep in her chest. "Let your energy flow, not just from the earth, but through me. We are two rivers, Lyra, meant to merge into one ocean." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing. She felt his immense power, ancient and wild, like a storm-tossed sea. Her own gift, gentle and earthbound, felt like a small stream beside it. But then she remembered his words. The earth does not demand. It responds. She softened, letting go of her fear, letting go of her doubts. She allowed her energy to reach for his, not to conquer, but to intertwine. As if pulled by a string, their palms met, a jolt of pure, unadulterated power surging between them. It wasn't just magic. It was a profound connection, soul to soul, ancient destiny meeting burgeoning love. What followed was a dance of power, a symphony of magic. They moved as one, their bodies swaying, their breaths mingling. Lyra channeled the earth's sorrow, transforming it into vital energy, while Alaric amplified it, directing it with a fierce, protective focus. A golden light, brighter than anything Lyra had ever seen, pulsed from their joined hands, filling the chamber. They aimed it at a small, blighted stone Alaric had placed in the corner. The stone shimmered, then slowly, miraculously began to heal, its gray surface turning to a vibrant, living green. It was a small victory, but a powerful one, proving their combined potential. Lyra's emotional state was one of dizzying confidence, a deep, unwavering trust in Alaric, and a burgeoning love that she now acknowledged not just in her heart, but in every fiber of her being. She felt complete, whole, because his strength complemented her own in a way she never imagined. This commitment marked a significant step in her transformation from passive Omega to active participant, a true partner in destiny. Just like that, everything changed. Moments later, as they stood, breathless and exhilarated, a desperate plea reached them. It wasn't a voice, but a raw, emotional echo carried on the wind, the anguish of a neighboring pack, ravaged by the blight. It was a subhook, a stark reminder that their efforts were not just for themselves, but for a dying world. The journey to the edge of the blighted lands was a descent into a nightmare. The air grew thick, heavy with the stench of decay, a cloying sweetness that clung to Lyra's tongue. Her heart ached with every step, because she could feel the land suffering, a deep, resonant thrum of pain that vibrated through her very bones. They passed through once lush forests, now skeletal, their branches like grasping claws against a perpetually bruised sky. Rivers ran sluggish and dark, their waters thick with blight. It was worse than any vision, a tangible horror. Lyra's immediate goal was to offer healing, to push back the encroaching death. She stood on a rise overlooking a vast, blighted valley, the devastation stretching as far as the eye could see. She channeled her power, a golden wave of energy surging from her hands, reaching out, trying to embrace the dying land. But the blight was a hungry, endless void. Her power, though amplified by Alaric's presence, was like a single drop in a vast, parched desert. She pushed harder, willing, begging the earth to respond, but it was too much. The effort drained her, leaving her weak and dizzy, her vision blurring. She collapsed, gasping, the golden light flickering out, swallowed by the overwhelming darkness. Alaric knelt beside her, his face grim, his golden eyes filled with a shared despair. "The blight, it is stronger than we anticipated," he murmured, his voice rough with frustration. Lyra's emotional state was one of profound sadness, a crushing sense of failure, and a growing dread. She saw the faces of her former pack members in her mind's eye, their despair now amplified by the blight's relentless advance. Can we truly overcome this? She wondered, a cold knot of fear tightening in her stomach. This scene was a stark reality check, emphasizing the blight's overwhelming strength and the immense challenge they faced. Still, Alaric's hand found hers, a warm, reassuring presence. "There is one more step," he said, his voice low. "The final ritual. It requires our full union, Lyra, a complete merging of our destinies, our souls." He spoke of ancient lore, of a bond so profound it could mend a broken world. This was the subhook, the ultimate promise, a path forward even in the face of such overwhelming despair. The decision was made, etched in Lyra's soul with the clarity of a moonlit night. Her immediate goal was to return to her former pack, not as a victim, but as a force for healing, a beacon of hope. Alaric stood beside her, his presence a steadying force, his golden eyes filled with a fierce resolve that mirrored her own. "I will go with you," he stated, his voice firm. "Your presence is crucial for both their spirit and the ritual." He knew the dangers, because the blight had twisted the land, creating new, treacherous pathways. The journey back was fraught with peril. The air grew colder, thick with a primal unease. Shadows danced between them, shifting and swirling, as if the forest watched their every move. Corrupted creatures twisted by the blight's influence emerged from the gloom, skeletal wolves with glowing red eyes, gnarled trents that moved with unnatural speed. They were the blight's desperate defense, its last attempt to stop the healing. Lyra and Alaric fought side by side, a seamless dance of power. Lyra used her gift to create shimmering barriers of earth and light, deflecting the creatures, while Alaric, in his Lycan form, was a blur of fur and fury tearing through their ranks. His growls, deep and primal, echoed through the blighted woods, a terrifying symphony of protection. With every heartbeat, Lyra felt her resolve harden. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming what was lost, about fulfilling a destiny that had been denied. Her emotional state was one of fierce determination, courage, and a quiet resolve. There was no turning back now. This physical journey back symbolized her internal transformation, from a timid omega to a powerful force, ready to confront her past and her father. Eventually, they reached the outskirts of her former pact's territory. The sight stole Lyra's breath. It was a desolate wasteland, far worse than she had imagined. The familiar scent of her pack, once comforting, was now tainted by despair, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The air thrummed with a profound sadness, a collective hopelessness that made her heart ache. But then, Lyra felt it, a faint, familiar pulse, the distant echo of her pack's life force, weak but still there. It was a subtle subhook, a promise that not all was lost, that a flicker of hope remained. The scent of her pack, once a comforting embrace, was now a bitter tang of despair and decay. Lyra stood on the blighted earth, her heart aching with every beat. Her immediate goal was to convince her father, Alpha Thorn, to see the truth, to unite the pack against the encroaching darkness. She walked towards the central lodge, Alaric a silent, imposing presence at her side. The pack members who saw her stared, their eyes wide with disbelief, then fear. They whispered, their words like sharp stones, the kidnapped Omega, the Lycan King. Alpha Thorn emerged from the lodge, his face gaunt, his eyes haunted. He looked older, his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. When his gaze landed on Lyra, a flicker of something, recognition, then shock, then a hardening, crossed his features. He saw Alaric, and his jaw tightened. His pride, though bruised, was still a formidable wall. "Lyra," he rasped, his voice rough with a mix of relief and accusation. "You return with him." Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "Father, please, the blight is real. It threatens us all. The pact, it was meant to save us. He didn't steal me. He claimed me for destiny. My power, our union, it's the only way." She gestured to the dying land around them, to the skeletal trees. "Look, can't you see what your rejection has done?" But Thorn shook his head, his eyes fixed on Alaric, a deep-rooted fear overriding all else. "Lies. He poisoned your mind. He stole you from me. You are changed, Lyra. This is not my daughter." He turned to the pack, his voice regaining a desperate, booming authority. "Do not be swayed. This king seeks to diminish us, to break our spirit. We will fight this blight with our own strength, not with false prophecies and stolen daughters." His words were a public rejection, a brutal blow that echoed through Lyra's very soul. She felt it, clear as day, the pack's collective hope, fragile as spun glass, shattering. Her emotional state was one of profound disappointment, heartbreak at her father's continued blindness and a dawning despair as his resistance undermined her efforts. His pride was a fortress impenetrable. This scene was a major setback, Lyra's plan crumbling before her eyes. Because of that, the blight, sensing the discord, sensing the despair, surged forward. a vital ancient spring, the lifeblood of the pack, gurgled, then went silent, its waters receding into the parched earth. It was a clear sign of their impending doom, a chilling subhook that tightened the noose around their necks. The silence that followed the spring's death was heavier than any grief. The pack members, witnessing Alpha Thorn's continued rejection of Lyra and the king, lost what little hope they had. Their faces, already gaunt, now seemed to hollow further. Many fell ill, their bodies weakening, their spirits broken. Lyra moved among them, her heart aching with every whispered plea, every vacant stare. She tried to heal them individually, a soft golden light pulsing from her hands as she touched fevered brows, but her efforts were like drops in an ocean, insufficient against the tide of despair and the blight's relentless advance. She saw Alara, a young Omega Lyra had grown up with, her eyes now dull and lifeless. Alara had always been so full of laughter, her spirit bright. Now she lay shivering, her breath shallow. Lyra felt a crushing sense of failure. She was supposed to be their hope, their healer, yet her power felt so small, so insignificant against this overwhelming tide of hopelessness. Her own energy diminished under the weight of their collective despair, like a flame struggling to breathe in a vacuum. "It's no use," a guttural voice rasped from a nearby hut. "We are forsaken." The words echoed in Lyra's mind, reinforcing her deepest fear, that she was, indeed, powerless. This scene emphasized the devastating consequences of the broken pact and Thorn's pride. It pushed Lyra to her emotional limits, making her feel the weight of her perceived insignificance once more, challenging her core strength. Still, Alaric, who had been quietly observing, his own face etched with pain, approached Lyra. He knelt beside her, his large hand gently covering hers. His golden eyes, usually so fierce, held a deep, shared sorrow. "The final ritual," he murmured, his voice a low, rough whisper. "It requires not just our power, Lyra. It requires the belief of the pack, their collective will. Without it, it is impossible." His words were a heavy stone, dropping into the well of Lyra's despair. The goal, which had seemed within reach, now felt utterly unattainable. The weight of Alaric's words, coupled with her father's defiance and the pack's crushing despair, sent Lyra spiraling into the deepest pit of her soul. She retreated to a desolate part of the blighted land, where the dying trees stood like skeletal fingers against the bruised sky. The air was cold, thick with the scent of death and hopelessness. She sank to the ground, pulling her knees to her chest, burying her face in her arms. Here, in the absolute silence, she succumbed to despair. Am I truly insignificant? The question, a lifelong companion, roared in her mind. She remembered her childhood, always overlooked, always quiet, always feeling like less than enough. Her father's words echoed, "This is not my daughter." Maybe he was right. Maybe she was nothing. Her power, the gift of the forsaken Omegas, felt faint, almost gone, a dying ember in a vast, cold darkness. The goal seemed impossible, a foolish dream. She was Lyra, the Omega who couldn't even save a patch of herbs, let alone an entire world. Alaric found her there, a silent sentinel in the gloom. He didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes. He simply sat beside her, his large frame a comforting presence in the overwhelming emptiness. His silence was a shared burden, a profound understanding of her despair. In that moment, Lyra felt utterly alone, yet strangely, not entirely. His presence was a faint anchor in the swirling chaos of her thoughts. This was Lyra's lowest point, the dark night of the soul, where her internal flaw, her belief in her own insignificance, was challenged to its core. As the silence stretched, broken only by the distant, mournful cry of a blighted creature, Lyra felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse. It came from deep within the earth, a tiny flicker of life, a stubborn spark of resilience from the very core of the dying land. It was a whisper, a memory of the life that still clung on, reminding her of her unique connection, her purpose. It was a sub-hook, a fragile thread of hope in the overwhelming darkness, a promise that the story wasn't over yet. The cold earth pressed against Lyra's cheek, damp and sorrowful. But beneath the despair she felt it, the faint, stubborn pulse of life. It was a rhythm, slow and deep, like a wounded heart still beating. Her mind, once consumed by doubt, began to clear. The blight wasn't just decay, it was a desperate cry for balance. The earth wasn't dying, it was in agony, screaming for its children to listen. She realized her connection to the earth wasn't just about healing. It was about listening to its deepest pain, understanding its language. The pact's spirit, she understood now, was intrinsically linked to the land's health. Healing one would heal the other. Alaric, sensing the shift in her, spoke, his voice a low, steady current in the quiet. There is more to the prophecy, Lyra. A forgotten verse. The ultimate healing requires not just our combined power, but a willing acceptance from the Alpha who broke the pact. A true act of humility. It is the key to unlocking the full potential. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a new, fragile hope. Your father. He must choose to believe. Lyra stared at him, a gasp catching in her throat. Her father. His pride, his stubbornness. That was the final, most formidable barrier. But then, a fierce determination, hot and bright, ignited within her. This was the path. This was the way to truly heal. Her emotional state shifted from despair to a quiet, fierce resolve, fueled by a deeper understanding of her power and the true nature of the blight. Her misbelief about powerlessness was shattered. She had agency, a purpose that stretched beyond herself. As the wind shifted, carrying the faint, sickly scent of the blight, Lyra rose, her gaze fixed on Alaric. He will listen, she said, her voice stronger than she thought possible. He must. Together, they formulated a desperate, last-ditch plan. This was a sub-hook, the final piece of the puzzle, leading them towards the ultimate confrontation. The path back to her pact's main camp felt heavier than the journey away. Lyra walked with a new purpose, her shoulders straight, Alaric a formidable shadow at her side. Her immediate goal was to inspire hope, to gain the pact's, especially her father's, acceptance. The air was thick with despair, a palpable weight that pressed down on her. Pack members huddled together, their faces gaunt, their eyes devoid of light. She stood before them, in the desolate clearing where the spring had died. Her father, Alpha Thorn, stood apart, his face a mask of guilt and defiance. Lyra spoke, her voice clear and strong, filled not with anger, but with profound sorrow and hard-won wisdom. I was taken, she began, her gaze sweeping over the haunted faces. But not as a captive of war. I was claimed for destiny. She spoke of the blight, its ancient origins, and the sacred pact. She spoke of her own journey, of the gift of the forsaken Omegas, and of Alaric's sacrifice. His act, she said, gesturing to Alaric, was not malice, but a desperate measure to save us all. Your pride, father, it broke a conduit, it fed the blight. Alaric stepped forward, his voice a low, powerful rumble that commanded attention. She speaks the truth. The blight will consume all. Your despair, your denial, feeds it. Only your belief, Alpha Thorn, only your acceptance of the sacred bond can turn the tide. He emphasized the dire consequences if they failed, his words painting a vivid picture of a world consumed by shadow. A few elders, their faces etched with worry, exchanged glances. They looked at Lyra, transformed from the quiet Omega they knew into a beacon of fierce resolve, and then at Alaric, his sincerity undeniable. A flicker of doubt, then a fragile spark of belief began to stir among them. Alpha Thorn stood rigid, his jaw clenched. He looked at the blighted land, then at his daughter, then at the king. His eyes, once so full of pride, now held a desperate, tormented uncertainty. He was caught between his past and the terrifying truth. This was a crucial moment, a subhook that left the audience guessing. Would his pride break, or would it doom them all? Alpha Thorn's internal struggle was a palpable tension in the air. He looked from the dying land to Lyra, his daughter, transformed and resolute. Then he looked at Alaric, the king he had scorned. His face, etched with guilt, finally softened, a flicker of understanding replacing his defiance. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Protect them!" he roared, his voice hoarse but clear, addressing his remaining warriors. "Protect my daughter! Protect the king! Prepare for the ritual!" It was a desperate act of acceptance, a final surrender of his pride for the sake of his pack. As if summoned by his decision, the blight roared. The ground trembled. The air thickened, turning cold and foul. Corrupted creatures, twisted by the blight's influence, surged from the shadows. Skeletal wolves with glowing red eyes, gnarled trents that moved with unnatural speed, their branches like grasping claws. They were the blight's last desperate defense, its fury unleashed. Lyra and Alaric moved as one, a seamless dance of power and protection. Lyra channeled her gift, creating shimmering barriers of earth and light, deflecting the creatures, her focus absolute. Alaric, in his Lycan form, was a blur of fur and fury, a magnificent beast tearing through their ranks, his growls deep and primal, echoing through the blighted woods. The pack warriors, fueled by their alpha's sudden resolve, formed a desperate defense, their howls joining Alaric's, a defiant roar against the encroaching darkness. Lyra's emotional state was one of heightened tension, fierce resolve, and a profound sense of relief and gratitude for her father's choice. The point of direct confrontation was imminent. With every step, with every surge of power, she felt the bond with Alaric pulse, strong and true. They reached the most blighted point, the ancient spring, now a gaping, lifeless maw in the earth. The corrupted creatures swarmed around them, a tide of monstrous despair. But Lyra and Alaric stood firm, their combined power a beacon against the encroaching shadow. The climax was upon them, a final, desperate stand for the fate of their world. The corrupted creatures shrieked, a chorus of despair that clawed at Lyra's sanity. They swarmed, their eyes glowing red, their bodies twisted by the blight's venom. But Lyra stood firm, Alaric a formidable wall beside her, his growls a deep, resonant rumble that shook the very ground. Her father, Alpha Thorn, and the few remaining warriors formed a desperate circle around them, their faces grim, their resolve fragile but present. This was the moment of truth. "Now, Lyra!" Alaric roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Channel it, all of it!" Lyra closed her eyes, shutting out the terror, shutting out the dying world around them. She reached deep within, to the core of her being, to the gift of the forsaken Omegas. She felt the earth's agony, a searing pain that mirrored her own. But she also felt the faint, stubborn pulse of life, the deep, ancient rhythm that had called to her in her darkest hour. She remembered the withering herbs, her father's despair, Alaric's silent burden. All of it fueled her. She opened her eyes, meeting Alaric's golden gaze. Their hands met, palms pressed together, fingers intertwined. A jolt, like 1,000 lightning strikes, surged through her, not painful but exhilarating. Alaric's power, wild and ancient, flowed into her, amplifying her own. Together they became a conduit. Lyra saw the blight, a vast, consuming shadow, and she poured every ounce of her combined power into it, not to destroy, but to heal. She envisioned vibrant green, rushing water, the laughter of children. From their joined hands, a blinding wave of pure, vibrant earth magic erupted. It was a golden tsunami washing over the blighted spring, pushing back the darkness with overwhelming force. The corrupted creatures shrieked, their forms dissolving into dust as the light touched them. The ground trembled, not with decay, but with rebirth. Lyra felt it, clear as day, the land responding, sighing with relief. New green shoots, impossibly bright, burst from the cracked earth, unfurling like tiny flags of victory. The ancient spring, once a gaping maw, began to bubble, then gush, its waters clear and pure. Lyra, utterly drained but triumphant, swayed, her legs giving out. Alaric caught her, pulling her close, his arms a strong, safe harbor. Her heart pounded, a joyous rhythm now. The central conflict was resolved. She had done it. She had saved them. The roar of the pack was deafening, a wave of cheers and howls that washed over Lyra, replacing the shriek of the blight. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief. The air, once thick with decay, now smelled of fresh earth and new life, sweet and clean. She leaned into Alaric, exhausted but whole, savoring his solid, real presence. Alpha Thorn, his face streaked with dirt and tears, pushed through the jubilant pack. He looked at Lyra, his eyes wide with awe and profound remorse. He knelt before her, his head bowed, a gesture that stunned the pack into a respectful silence. "My daughter," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "I was blind. My pride. It nearly cost us everything. You have saved us all. You have honored the pact." He looked at Alaric, then back at Lyra. "I accept the sacred bond, fully, without reservation." His words, a public affirmation, solidified the union between their lines, mending the conduit he had broken. Lyra, though bone-weary, found strength in the pack's renewed hope. She moved among them, her touch gentle, offering small healing touches to those still weak from the blight's lingering effects. She saw Lyra, her friend, sitting up, her eyes no longer dull but filled with a fragile light. Lyra touched her hand, and Alara's fingers squeezed hers. A silent thank you. Lyra's emotional state was a mix of profound relief, exhaustion, and a quiet joy at seeing her pack's spirit return, their faces now reflecting hope instead of despair. This was the winding down of major plot threads, the immediate consequences of the climax. As the land continued its miraculous healing, a soft, golden light seemed to emanate from Lyra and Alaric, a visible manifestation of their unbreakable bond. They shared a tender, unspoken moment, their eyes meeting, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. Months later, the Thornpack lands flourished, a vibrant tapestry of green and gold. The ancient spring gushed with crystal-clear water, teeming with life. The blight was a distant, horrifying memory, a scar that served as a reminder of what they had overcome. Lyra, no longer the quiet, overlooked Omega, walked with a quiet grace, her presence humming with the magic of the earth. She was a respected leader, a healer, and a bridge between two worlds. Her relationship with Alaric was one of deep, abiding love and partnership. They moved seamlessly between her former pack and his ancient territory, their bond a source of strength for both their peoples. She was no longer his captive, but his queen, his fated partner, his equal. Their love wasn't just a personal connection. It was a testament to the power of acceptance, of healing, and of destiny fulfilled. One evening, Lyra stood with Alaric on a vibrant, moonlit hill overlooking their now flourishing united lands. The air was cool, scented with blooming night jasmine and the clean, wild scent of Alaric's lichen form. His arm was around her waist, his touch a comforting weight. Her heart swelled with contentment, purpose, and love. She had found her true strength, her voice, and a love she never expected, all born from the most terrifying of circumstances. Her transformation was complete. From a powerless, insignificant Omega to a powerful, confident leader and fated partner. Epilogue. Years later, children from both packs, their eyes bright with curiosity and hope, gathered at the ancient spring. They listened, rapt, as the elders recounted the tales of Lyra, the Omega Queen, and King Alaric, the Guardian. They spoke of the blight, of the broken pact, and of the fated union that brought an era of unparalleled peace. The children learned that true strength wasn't found in dominance, but in sacred bonds, in the courage to heal, and in the unwavering belief in destiny. The laughter of the children echoed through the revitalized forest, a joyful melody that promised a future of unity and peace, all because a captive Omega found her power and a king found his fated love.